Mirasee. Two men, neighbors and friends, named Nabek and Dagar, lived near a great desert. Nabek had an incomparable horse. It was beautiful and as graceful as a deer. Dagar dreamed of having his friend's horse. Day and night he could not stop thinking about the horse. Finally, he went to Nabek and asked him to sell it to him. Hi, I'm Lisa Bloom, the story coach, and you're listening to Once Upon a Business. In each episode, we explore a story, a fairy tale, folk tale, or traditional story, so that we can discover the amazing lessons relevant for business and for entrepreneurs. To the friend's request, Nabek said, "I would not sell this animal for all the gold and diamonds in the world." Unable to control his desire, Dagar decided to trick his friend in order to gain the horse. He disguised himself as a beggar, covering his face, and sat by the side of the road where Nabek passed each day. When Nabek approached, Dagar moaned and called out for help, pretending to be thirsty and hungry. Nabek took pity on the beggar, who he thought could no longer walk. He put him on the horse's back in order to carry him to the marketplace. The moment Dagar was on the horse, he sat up straight and took control of the reins. He kicked the horse and galloped away, shouting back at his neighbor, "I am Dagar, you will never get your horse back." Nabek did not chase after Dagar, but he called after him, "Dagar, stop for a moment. I want to ask you something." Recognizing that his friend could not catch him by foot, Dagar stopped. Nabek called out, "By Allah's will, you are now the owner of my wonderful horse. But please never tell anyone how you got the horse." "Why not?" inquired Dagar. "Well, if people should hear how you tricked me, they might never stop to help another beggar at the side of the road. They will be afraid. Perhaps they will leave some poor soul to die. If this story should be told, it could cause great evil in the world." Dagar listened and said nothing for a long time. Then he climbed down off the horse and gave it back to his neighbor. Together, they returned to the tent of Nabek and made an agreement of peace and swore to be friends forever. This story was rewritten by Yoel Perez. This seems to be a story of greed and envy. These kinds of stories usually have a twist and end with the protagonist learning the danger of these human desires. Then he or she gets their due punishment. But this story has a somewhat different take on the classic theme. It suggests that we need to stop and think about how our desires might affect other people, to consider the consequences of our actions. Like Dagar, who desired Nabek's horse, but in tricking Nabek by pretending to be a beggar and then stealing his horse, he didn't stop to think about how that action could impact the greater community. Nabek is wise. He persuaded his friend to listen to him and then appealed to Dagar's compassion so that he would get his horse back. It's an interesting question. Is he motivated by the desire to get his horse back, which would make him cunning, quite the trickster, or is he motivated by the desire to protect other beggars? In the latter case, it would show his compassion, his kindness. I like to believe that compassion was his driver, and there's proof of this in that he seemed to know Dagar was at heart a good man, and that's why he forgave him and they returned home side by side. This story is a great example of Michelle Obama's saying, "When they go low, we go high." Rather than choosing violence or rage or some other means to get his horse back, Nabek shows Dagar the impact of his actions. It would have been easy for Nabek to use shame, to say that if Dagar told others, they would think less of him. Instead, he shared the very real social consequence that others would stop helping those truly in need. And this is a message that's just as true today. Many people are afraid to help others, fearing that it's a trick. And in business, there are many that would steal an idea and not be aware of any repercussion. It's interesting that two men are described as neighbors and friends. So it begs the question of trust. Who can you trust, and when will people act out of character and be taken over by emotions like envy and greed? Developing relationships of trust in business is critical, and yet we often don't think about it or plan for it. And I can certainly relate to this. Over the years, I've struggled with hiring people because trust in these relationships doesn't always come naturally to me. I worry that they won't do a good enough job or that they'll leave without completing the work. I've heard of many business partnerships that have ended up in conflict and even in court. Often it's greed and envy that are the cause. One of the partners gets a big opportunity or some other windfall, and the partner feels that they should be getting their share. It's easy to understand. When we see others doing well and sometimes getting what feels like all the luck, it's hard not to be envious. But I believe that envy and greed are part of human nature. We should recognize and admit them as such. And that's what I love about Nabok's response. It feels like he's not surprised by his friend's betrayal. He recognizes that this is the human condition. We desire what others have. It's as simple as that. And doesn't social media and our obsession with watching and admiring others and what they show of their lives online, doesn't that prove it? Instead of fighting Dagar or shaming him, Nabok recognizes that this is an emotion we all feel, that it's natural and it's okay, but it doesn't mean that he's going to get away with his horse. He's ready to get it back. We could all take a leaf out of Nabok's book and learn to acknowledge these intense desires and unpleasant behaviors, but at the same time, to assume good intention, to embrace goodwill, and to trust that everyone will learn their own lessons and make the right choices. I'm Lisa Bloom, and you've been listening to Once Upon a Business. You can find out more about me at story-coach.com. That's story-coach.com. Once Upon a Business is part of the Mirasee FM podcast network, which also includes such shows as Self-Awakened Lifestyle and Just Between Coaches. This episode of Once Upon a Business was produced by Cynthia Lamb. Mishi Lance and Jeff Govertson assembled the episode. Danny Inney is our executive producer. Post-production was by Post Office Sound. To catch the episodes that are coming up on Once Upon a Business, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now. And if you like the show, please leave us a starred review. It really does help us out. Thank you. We'll see you next time.